Human existence is fundamentally relational, and throughout history, philosophers have emphasized the indispensable role of community in the flourishing of the human person. The human person attains self-realization, meaning, identity, and fulfillment not by isolation, but in koinonia, a fellowship of shared life. Today, we reflect on how this fellowship shapes the individual as well as the society. In the bid to understand this fellowship and its societal implications, do not only reveal how humans relate, but also challenge us to reflect deeply on the quality and the ethical foundation of our relationship. The first two categories are often linked to friendship with benefits. It sustains material and personal advantages. Here, a friend is only a friend when the material needs and wants are or can be satisfied by the friendship. This type of friendship are only there as long as the rainy day lasts. They are friends who share in your joy, because deep down they know they will also benefit from that joy. And if it does not happen, friendship ends. These categories contradict sharply Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy, which warns that human beings must never be used merely as a means to an end, but should always be recognized and treated as ends in themselves. Thus, Aristotle's third form of friendship proposes and advocates for a friendship that transcends beyond material benefit to the whole person and well-being of all parties involved. It is built on moral goodness, mutual respect, integrity, responsibility, and concern for the flourishing of others. It is closely connected to authentic living, which requires sincerity, purpose-driven living, transparency, and value-aligned choices, rather than social pretense or manipulation. Authentic friendship strengthens not only the individual, but the broader society, because society is individual writ large. Therefore, we are challenged to re-examine our relational intentions and to cultivate friendship that inspire growth rather than exploitation, as we exploit the theme, Aristotle's notion of friendship, the basis for authentic living. Dear esteemed formators and students, I humbly invite and urge you all to sit tight as we speculate and ponder on Aristotle's notion of friendship through the instrumentality of our academic gurus, and see how we can create a just and amiable community for all to grow. Thanks and welcome again. Signed, Yin Azul Teso, Secretary Lecture Board, Kelvin Chikede Vincent, Vice Chairman Lecture Board, Fufeni Boinga Kizito Paul, Chairman Lecture Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Lecture Board Chairman, for that keynote address. Next item on our agenda is induction of the Philosophy 1 students. And this session, I would like to invite the NAPS president to anchor it. Please, Samuel Bassi, if you are here, kindly come.
Those to be inducted into the Department of Philosophy should please stand. Dear moderator, I humbly ask you to induct these brothers of ours officially as members of National Association of Philosophy Students, NAPS, St. Joseph Chapter.
Do you find them worthy of this induction?
After due consultations with the executive body of the association and upon recommendation from other comrades, I testify that they are worthy.
Relying on the testimony of your president and the fellow philosophers, I hereby invite you to take your induction pledge. By the help of God and the authority conferred on me as the moderator of this association, I hereby declare you members of the National Association of Philosophy Students, St. Joseph Chapter. And congratulations to all of you.
Dear friends, at this point, we have come to the main reason why we have gathered here tonight. And in humility, I would like to hand over the microphone to the moderator to take over from there.
A very good evening to you, our dear Father Moderator, who happens to be acting in double capacity, who is also representing our dear Father Rector, the Pater Familias. A very good evening to you, my beloved brothers, and indeed to one and all. The pleasure is mine to welcome you to this gathering in which we are to celebrate intellectual friendship. In the first chapter of the 8th book of Aristotle's work, titled The Nicomachean Ethics, he postulates, and I quote, "For without friends, no one would choose to live, though he had other goods in abundance." Unquote. Then, in a bid to reconcile this to our current situation, where friendship is both abundant and scarce at the same time, we tend to meet with many puzzles, which tonight's lecture attempts to demystify. Having said that, our dear Father Rector ably represented my fellow seminarians, and indeed one and all, kindly join me as I invite to make his presentation on the topic, Aristotle's notion of friendship, the basis for authentic living. Please, let's encourage the masquerade of tonight, an erudite philosopher king by name Anyam Enoch Tese. A round of applause, please.
A young man visited an old philosopher, and he asked him, "Master, how will I be able to know my true friends?" And the old philosopher took him to a quiet room where 3 seats were designed and arranged. He pointed to the first one. This is utility. People sit on it when they need you, and whenever you don't support them, they leave. He went to the second seat and pointed. This is pleasure. People sit on this seat when they see you make them excited, happy at that moment. And when the happiness is not there, they leave. He went to the third seat and pointed to it and said, this is virtue. The seat was calm, steady, and beautifully old. He said to him, this is the most difficult seat to sit on, because it entails courage, it entails readiness, it entails sincerity, it entails goodwill. It is very difficult. Fewer persons sit on this, they endure on this seat. The young man asked the philosopher, how then do I make people to sit on this seat? The old philosopher smiled and said to him, you cannot make them to sit on this seat. You can only be one to be seated with on this seat. This story about an old philosopher and a young man is a summary of what I'm going to present tonight as we reflect on Aristotle's notion of friendship, the basis for authentic living. And so I take the introduction. Friendship as both a moral and social phenomenon lies at the very heart of human existence. To live authentically is to live in meaningful relationship with others. Isolation, by contrast, diminishes our being. And that is why Francis Bacon, we argue, as quoted by Professor Ikeke, who recently presented a paper for us here in his book, The Power and Laws of Friendship, that anyone existing in solitude is either a beast or a god. It's not a human being at all. In every society, individuals seek companionship that foster growth, moral support, and genuine understanding. Yet, in modern age, the concept of friendship suffered deep distortion. What once signified virtue, mutual care, and shared moral purpose has often been reduced to self-interest, fleeting pleasure, a digital association devoid of depth. This moral crisis invites a philosophical re-examination of what it truly means to be friend and to live authentically as human person. Among philosophers who reflected on this subject, Aristotle occupies an enduring and central place. A student of Plato, a tutor of Alexander the Great, Aristotle's philosophical enterprise covers logic, metaphysics, ethics, politics, and natural science. His ethical writings, particularly the Nicomachean Ethics, provide one of the most systematic accounts of happiness. And then he will define happiness as the activity of the soul in accordance to virtue. Grounded not in external possessions, but in cultivation of virtue. Within this context, Aristotle elevates friendship to a moral and existential necessity, describing it as a bond that unites happiness and the good life. The life of every human being tends towards the good, and this good is characterized by what Aristotle calls happiness. This happiness can be attained when one works on the path of virtue, as I said earlier. For Aristotle, there are two kinds of virtue, namely intellectual and moral virtue. And then, intellectual virtue involves practical wisdom, art, scientific knowledge. You can mention them. Why moral virtues involve justice, temperance, generosity, courage, and friendship. And with the enjoyment of friendship as one of the moral virtues, Aristotle saw the need for man as a homosocialist, that is a social being, to be interdependent. This implies that man can only authenticate his life while living with others in the society, knowing that he is the prime creator and receptor, the end and the purpose of all kinds of relationships in the society. Living in the society entails being in a relationship with others, which Martin Buber will call the ideal relationship. But then, there seems to be a distinction between friendship and social life. Man as a social animal is a bit different from man as an animal that can be involved in friendship. Man has to be social before he can be involved in friendship. If man is not sociable, he cannot be able to be friendly. It is against this background that this paper seeks to appraise Aristotle's notion of friendship as a basis for authentic living. By examining Aristotle's distinction among friendship of utility, pleasure, and virtue, this paper seeks to unveil the ethical and ontological depth underlying his concept of friendship. The paper further relates this ancient insight to the contemporary human condition, where the pursuit of genuine friendship remains both a philosophical challenge and a moral imperative. Clarification of concept. According to Aristotle in the Interpretazione, the clarity of definition is more important than its brevity, and it is on this basis that I wish to clarify the concept involved in this topic for easy assimilation. First, the concept friendship. Etymologically, friendship from a Greek word philos, a friend, someone dearly loved in a personal, intimate way, covers both amicable relations and casual acquaintances, as well as intimate relationships within and beyond the family. Also, in the ancient period, the notion of friendship was understood to be an enduring and reciprocal love between equals and a mark of self-sufficiency rather than deficiency. Then it was known that friendship is to build someone and not to cause harm to individuals. The term friendship can be defined as a dynamic supporting relationship between individuals built on mutual trust, affection, and shared experiences that enrich their lives and foster personal growth. And this is gotten from Venom, page 17. For the want of time, where there are much definitions, I shall take just few, which are identical, so that we can be brief and concise. The New Catholic Encyclopedia defines friendship as a reciprocal relationship of affection or sympathy between persons of the same sex, or at least independent of sexual attraction, and based on a community of nature and of interest. Friendship, according to Aristotle, is virtue or involves virtue, and is besides most necessary for life. There are other definitions there, but when you interact with the paper, after here you can be able to look at that. The concept, authentic living. Authentic living embodies the harmony between truth, consciousness, and existence. To be authentic is to be genuine, reliable, and in accord with reality. One whose action reflects inner truth rather than imitation or falsity. Authenticity, therefore, is not merely a moral trait, but an ontological state, a way of being that aligns essence with existence. Aligning your essence with your existence is not just to exist, but then the essence of your being to align with existence is to live an authentic life. The concept of living extends beyond biological act of being alive. The concept that we are alive biologically is not the case here. True life is not measured in this context by motion or breath, but by conscious awareness and rational activity. As Aristotle asserts, life is defined in the case of animal by power of perception, and in that of man by power of perception or thought. Therefore, life seems to be essentially the act of perceiving or thinking in Comedian Ethics, Book 9, Chapter 9. You can go through that chapter 8. Life in this sense is an active realization of thought and will, a continuous self-expression of rational being. Hence, authentic living is a deliberate practice of existence rooted in consciousness. One is not born to be authentic. Deliberately, you practice it. Truth and integrity. It is to live as a reflective, self-aware being who acts freely and responsibly. Both Aristotle and Plato view such a mode of life as essential to genuine friendship, which arises from virtue and love. Plato affirms that true friends do not harm, for friendship grounded in goodness reflects the moral truth of existence itself. To live authentically, therefore, is to live truthfully, to think, to act, and to reflect in fidelity with one's essence and to the reality that sustains it. Some notion of friendship. Some philosophers' view on friendship. Let's take Aristotle. Plato, I beg your pardon. Plato, in love with the state, in his Republic, maintained that the exercise of friendship should not downplay one's love for the state. This is because the love of the state is prerequisite for all who would belong to the ruling class. This is strongly emphasized when we say that the function of the guardian is to ensure that friends at home shall not wish nor foes abroad be able to harm our state. St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas is a scholastic and a great medieval philosopher, as we can find in his Summa Theologia, argues that friendship must go hand in hand with charity. And charity is for him friendship of men and women for God. This implies that the friendship which St. Thomas Aquinas talked about is characterized by mutual benevolence, that is, each friend wishes good things to the other. For him, charity cannot be differentiated in either of these ways: utility, pleasure, and virtue. For its end is one, namely the goodness of God and the fellowship of everlasting happiness, which friendship is based. Furthermore, for Aquinas, it is self-evident that charity is the center and the epitome of Christian life. For the commandment to love God and one's neighbor are the heart of the law, and hence the will of God. And that love, which is friendship, is anything but self-evident. Friendship for him is only possible with people similar to ourselves and those to whom we are bound by goodwill. Lastly, he made a distinction between love of friendship and love of concupiscence. In the love of friendship, it is more a matter of the love of the good that I desire for another. That is to say, it is a true friendship because it is based on goodness of friendship and of friends. On the other hand, the love of concupiscence, which he calls animal concupiscencia, is love under the aspect of pursuit, that is passion, as the basic form of the passion of desire. Thus, this love consists of utility and pleasure friendship, and it lacks the qualities of true friendship. Immanuel Kant relates friendship to love and respect, in its definition, Kant called friendship the union of two persons through equal mutual love and respect. Nevertheless, he began his theory of friendship by distinguishing two motives of action in man, which are the love of self and the love of humanity, which is called altruistic love. In the love of self, the motive of action is derived from man himself. It is a type of love where two individuals are concerned only with their own welfare and the happiness and regards the happiness of others. According to him, this self-love has no moral merit, but has a moral law. On the other hand, altruistic love is prompted by our love for mankind and by our desire to promote happiness of humanity. And also, it has a moral value, changing from today. And that is why you find people say, I was in love, but I'm no longer in love. Because they are all of loving, and independence on mutable affective state. The relationship endures only as long as the shared pleasure remains. When the source of delight is in its immediacy, yet with pleasure. The commitment, provisional, and the relationship use one another as instruments of gratification, mistaking the transitory glow of passion for the enduring light of friendship. This confusion is evident in modern societies, particularly among the youth, where sensual indulgence, material advantages, and momentary pleasures are often mistaken for intimacy or love. Interestingly, Aristotle notes that such friendship seldom gives rise to complaint, since both participants receive what they desire simultaneously. The friendship of pleasure, while eliminating the affective dimension of human association, remains the most ephemeral of Aristotle's tragic typology. It belongs to the sphere of becoming rather than being, to the domain of pathos rather than ethos. It enriches human experience with its charm and vivacity, yet lacks the moral substance to endure. As such, it is not the summit of friendship, but a reflection of earliest, most passionate, and most unstable form. The friendship of those who seek not good